One of my favorite pastimes is playing solo role-playing games, and over the past few months it's become increasingly more difficult to find time where I can actually play at a table with dice. So I decided to make this a portable solution that has all my dice in one spot and I can take with me anywhere. Today is going to be a build video of me putting together my version 2 of this device. I'll have all the models and the designs on my website. Check it out in the link in the description. Components wise, there's a few things we need. First was the Arduino Nano. I decided to use this one because of its form factor. And the second thing is a screen. So this is going to be a 128 by 64 OLED display to help with power consumption. Next up, we'll need a battery and a device to moderate charging and distribution of the power. And of course, tactile switches, because if I'm going to give up rolling dice, I want something that feels nice. And finally, just a little switch to turn it on and off to save some extra juice when I'm not using it. This project was super exciting for me, not just because of I love dice and solo RPG games, but this is the most complex modeling project that I've ever done. I decided to build the housing in 3 separate parts to make it easy for disassembly and assembly, actually. The first one is the component that holds the keys, screen, Arduino, pretty much most of the components. Now, the green section is a separation for the battery housing and also the area for the charger. Everything is going to be USB-C, so I know a lot of people have those cables laying around nowadays. And then the back plate is just held in with 4 M2 screws. Step number 1, if you're doing this project for yourself at home, is getting some helping hands. This is a pretty small project in terms of size, and because of that, there's a lot of fiddly little components. So get those out. Next up was just to get the keys in the right spots. 9 of them. I'm using brown switches, but you can really use whatever you would like. To make this a little bit more simple, I decided to wire all of the grounds for all of the keys together and then just run one wire from any of the switches back to the Arduino. The rest of the keys and the inputs will come from a digital pin, and I'll be using 9 of the digital pins on the Arduino board itself to run to each key. I think larger keyboards use a different method of detecting position, but I've got plenty of digital pins here, so it should be pretty straightforward and easy for me to do that. This is a great example of where picking your hardware is important for the scope of your project. I decided to look at a smaller board as well, but it only had 8 digital pins and I actually have 9 buttons, so that one wouldn't have worked. When it comes to power, I'm going to be using the 3.3 volt on the Arduino rather than the 5 volt because the lithium batteries that I have only put out a 3.7 volt and I'm not using a circuit board to step that up to 5 volts. Good thing is the OLED takes very little power itself, so everything can run perfectly fine for quite a long time just off of the 3.3 and the battery size I have. I actually added a second wire to both the ground and the power on this side of the Arduino. One of those sets are going to have to go to the battery so we can actually have power when we're using this device, and the other set will go to the OLED display. The additional 2 wires are going into analog positions, and these will send the signals to tell the display what to show and when to show it. Here you can actually see the pins on the OLED display. On the far left side there we have power, then we have ground, and then we have the 2 analog pins that I just talked about previously. I forgot to record it, but here is the actual output of what that wiring looks like. Again, the diagram will be in the documentation for this project. The screen gets placed in the front of the housing, and then the Arduino gets flipped over and put on there with the USB-C port going on the right side from this position. All those wires up on the top will go down to the switches, and those left 2, ground and power, go back up to the battery like we just discussed a minute ago. Now this is the second time that I've done this project, and I'm getting a little bit better at it each time. I decided to put a little bit of solder on each of the key switches pins, so that way instead of having to do the process one at a time, I was able to batch some of that work, and getting these done this way was much quicker. Now the green wire is for the roll button. I just decided to pick a different color to make it a little bit easier to differentiate the wires when they're inside the housing. So I am by no means a programmer, but I am savvy enough to make my way around some code. I decided to write out the logic and use ChatGPT to help me write the software. This worked out actually really well. It did take a lot of iteration, but I did get to a solution that I really enjoyed. The most fiddly part of this project was actually soldering together and wiring this little tiny switch. It's just a small component to work with and was quite annoying. These helping hands came in very handy, excuse the pun, when doing this project, and honestly don't think I would have been able to do it without some type of device like this. The entire switch gets recessed into this little housing and pushed out the side. Now, I tried to make everything in this housing pressure fit with the components, but this is the one area that you'll probably want to use a couple drops of super glue just to hold it in. You're going to be pushing in on that, and there's nothing on the back side of it preventing you from pushing in with your finger without the glue itself. Next, we'll go ahead and tackle the battery. Now, I'll snip this off since I don't need the quick connect. It's going to get soldered directly onto the board. Now this circuit board, I'll be honest, I don't fully understand all of what it does, but it is what allows the lithium battery to be charged and also for it to discharge power to the Arduino safely. Prevents things such as over discharge or things like that. I don't understand exactly what happened, but these are lithium batteries and they are potentially known to explode if used incorrectly. So this is basically a safety feature to make sure that that doesn't happen. Outside of just the positive and negative wires coming from the battery, we also need to solder the positive and negative from the Arduino. The ground is coming directly from the ground on the Arduino board, but the red wire in this case is coming from the switch that we just wired, which will allow us to turn it on and off as needed. The circuit board can be flipped upside down and pressure fit into this small area here, and then the battery just gets loosely fit into this other section of the green housing. All the wires can be just stuffed inside since you're not going to see them anyway, and I'm just going to do another check to make sure everything is still working as expected. I wanted the housing to be pretty simple, so I'm just using 4 M2 screws to hold it all together, and this makes it really easy to disassemble. Now you have access to both ports, the Arduino on the top and the battery on the bottom, just in case you want to make any changes to the code itself. Last part of this project is to take some of the custom keycaps that I've designed for this project specifically and add them to the device. If you have your own key switches, feel free to use those as well. Well, I've got to say, I can't be happier with how this turned out. This was my first electronics project, but I've been wanting to do an Arduino project for many years at this point. If this is something that you're interested in picking up, I will be selling the plans on my website and my Etsy shop, where you can get the 3D files, you can get the code, and the diagram on how you need to wire it up to have the same thing. All the ports are accessible, so you'll have the ability to do the code and redo it and modify it how you want. I am by no means a professional programmer, so there's a lot of improvement that could be made on that front. I'll also have links to everything and what parts you'll need for this. Again, thanks for being here. I appreciate everyone and your support. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below. Next video will be later this week, kind of a business update, and let you know how the 3D printing side is going. All right, we'll talk soon.